If you want to learn how to achieve a fat and punchy snare sound and how to layer snares to get the desired sound, watch this video. This is a demo music I created for this tutorial. I found several snares with different characters to combine and create a beautiful snare. Let's start the process with the transient section of the snare. For this section, which is the attack, I chose a very short snare with a good punch, and I placed it on beats 2 and 4 of each measure. For this part of the snare, we need a sharp sound and don't really need the low-end frequencies, so we should cut some of the low frequencies with an equalizer. At the end of the snare, there is also a sound similar to reverb that we should remove, because later we will add the tail section of the snare separately. To give the snare more body, we need to add another snare with good low end to our existing snare. I found a suitable snare for this purpose. To start, we place the second snare exactly under the first snare, which was the attack part of our final snare. We don't need high frequencies for this layer, so we simply cut them off with a basic equalizer. One trick I use to create more punch and impact is to add a few milliseconds of delay to sounds with low frequencies. You can also try this technique on the kick drum. It can have very interesting results. Another important aspect to consider is the phase of each snare drum. You need to make sure that they don't cancel each other out destructively. If the phases of two sounds are opposite, they will cancel each other out in certain frequency ranges. To fix this, you can simply invert the phase of one of the sounds. It's impossible to completely prevent phase cancellation from happening, because in any piece of music that consists of multiple layers of sound, there will always be phases that are opposite to others. However, you can control this issue by checking the audio analyzers and listening to the resulting sound. To add tail to the snare sound, I use a longer sample. I also added this sample exactly under the previous snares, so that they play simultaneously, and their sounds are heard at the same time. This sample has a lot of attack and transients that we don't need, since we already built this section with the first snare. Therefore, we remove this part, and place a crossfade at the beginning to avoid interference with the previous snares at the start of the tail sound. We also use a simple equalizer to control the amount of low frequencies, ensuring they don't interfere with other sounds. We've built the main body of our snare with 3 snare layers. Now let's add some Preshift to the snare. I have a sample that has a really nice Preshift sound. Simply add the sample under the existing snares. You can identify the Preshift and snare sections from the sample waveform. Just delete the main hit section and place the Preshift of the sample before your snares. To avoid a click sound at the cut point, apply a crossfade with a fast fade out. The Preshift sound is a popular technique in electronic music. Although it is a very short sound, it plays a significant role in enhancing the snare drum sound and adding movement to the final mix. As a final tip, remember that the snare drum sound should be tuned in relation to the other drums and instruments in the music. Even a small change in the tonality of the snare drum can have a big impact on your final mix. We're done crafting the main snare sound, and now it's time to move on to the mixing stage. To start, I adjusted the level of all the snare layers, and routed all the channels to a bus channel in the mixer so I can apply effects to them all simultaneously. The first effect I use is an equalizer. I feel like the frequencies around 170 Hz are a bit strong. I reduce the intensity of those frequencies with a dynamic equalizer. In the next step, I use a compressor to compress and unify the snare sounds. I use a method similar to parallel compression to compress this sound. In this method, the heavily compressed sound is mixed with the original signal, resulting in a great punchy and loud output. For the final touch, I added a bit of reverb as a send to the snare channel to take the sound out of the dry state. That's it for now. I hope you learned something new. If you have any questions or feedback, please let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to my channel and hit the bell to be notified of new videos.